if you drive past two wind farms, the likelihood is that we've built a substation, cabled and connected one of those to the grid. And again, we don't direct them, but we cable substation and connect to the grid, and we design that and deliver it. So that's a business that was around 5 million a few years ago, and that hit close to 50 million last year. So that's just another little business, again, built off the same values, which is quote competitively, execute with speed and with attention to detail. We've won last year, and I suppose from a HR perspective, I'm pretty pleased about this, is that we were actually nominated for the top employer globally by Investors of People. So we made it to the top 5 on the scoring of our own employees as being a company that communicates with its employees, invests with them and retains them better than essentially most others in our industry. But across all industries, we were nominated for the best employer in 2018 for companies of just below 1,000. So that's where we've been at. We spend a lot of time with corporate social responsibility, so we've worked with schools in Galway, Limerick, Dublin. We work a lot with LIT, UL. We sponsor some students. We sponsor apprentices to become engineers. And we try interact as much with the local community. That's something any company nowadays needs to do, but it's something that we've won some awards for. We've been nominated twice in the Galway Chamber of Commerce for that as well. Now to what I said would be the topic, which is something for you to take away. In building your career, so at this stage of my career, I've recruited a lot of people, I've promoted a lot of people, I've had to look at my own career, but I've seen people go to the very top. I've sat on boards, both the public sector and private sector, where CEOs were being picked. I've done the psychometrics on some of the leading people in industry in Ireland and Great Britain, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in that executive education of people through the Irish Management Institute and that. So here's a little bit of my feedback from working with executives, working with people and managing and actually promoting people through the years. The first piece is that it's all about you, and when I say it's all about you, it's about you knowing you. And the first thing you need to know is, what are your strengths? And I still ask what I call the old nun's question at interview. What strengths would you bring to this role? And then I ask, what weaknesses do you bring to this role? And I have a hang-up if you have no weaknesses, because it means you've got a blind spot. Nobody's perfect, and you should know where your weak spots are. And again, this self-awareness thing is critical to building your career. Again, know what you're good at and try to stick to those strengths. It's very like the strategy piece I was talking with Kirby. You stick to what you're good at, you don't go beyond that, and you try to grow that and get better at using that, and that's the best way to grow. What drives you? And again, what sort of drive have you? Maybe you're perfectly balanced and you want to be a Buddhist monk. It's unlikely that you're going to drive high performance sales for a company if you're so well balanced. So it's again looking at, what actually drives you, what gets you excited, what gets you out of bed. And that's very important, because you're going to spend a lot of time working on your career. Therefore, you have to be interested. So what your strengths, what drives you, and what excites you. And I think that's the start point, and that's even where the career guidance teacher should be starting. And my greatest disappointment was I launched a graduate program in 2015 when I joined Kirby. It's been a great success for us. We've developed a lot of young people very well. My greatest disappointment was seeing in the initial interviews is you get in somebody with a great CV, young engineer coming out of college, and you find that they don't know why they did engineering, and they're not really sure if that's what they want to do as their career. And if you're sitting there as an employer, you're saying, they're not going to find that out on my book. And there is that problem of how did they get there? Is this the driver that brought them there? And if I find it's the kid who always wanted to be an engineer, was always interested in building things, and they've got the right CV, it's a no-brainer and it works. So that piece of knowing what you want becomes critical. So you need to find that out and spend some time finding that out before you hit job markets, really. As regards courses, again, for anybody doing any education programs, and this includes going back at a later stage, get the right course. We have a huge element of people dropping out of programs at third level. It's getting better year on year, but it's still a problem. Particularly in the engineering and science areas, people need to go in at the level you can excel at and then build, go from the known to the unknown, and try and get your programs basic and build on those. Employers, when they look, they like to see a 2-1. That's terrible, isn't it? It's simplistic thinking from the employer. I want to see a 2-1. 1-1 doesn't really bother me, and which is interesting for me because I teach on the Trinity MBA, I teach on IMI master's programs, and students, really bright people, would almost hassle you wondering, why did I only get a 2-1? I wanted a 1-1. When I put on my employer's hat, I don't really differentiate a 1-1 and a 2-1. And in fact, sometimes I have to wonder about the 1-1. So again, it's lazy from us as employers, but you picked a course, you went on it. It would be nice if you excelled on it, because if you pick a job, if we pick you, you join us, we'd like you to excel in that. And the magic word out there is you grind it out. The problem with this, of course, I have children myself, or one in college, two long finished college, is that youth gets in the way of being so clear. But if you want to build a career, that grinding out comes true. There's a guy called Charles O'Reilly. He teaches at Harvard. He teaches at Stanford now, but he still goes back and does some teaching on change. But he did some fantastic research on the whole concept of companies that last 50 years. Note Kirby lasted 50 years. The companies that last 50 years, what differentiates them from other companies? Because the majority of companies do not last 50 years. And what he discovered was the ambidextrous organization lasts 50 years. And I want to tie this back to your career, because what's an ambidextrous organization? An ambidextrous organization is an organization that can both grind out today's numbers, deliver what you're supposed to deliver today, the detail, but also is reinventing and stepping slowly towards the future at the same time. It's doing two things at once. Some organizations dream of having super futures. Mary Harney said to us that in 7 years, I think this was around 1990, we'd have the best health system in the world. Meanwhile, grannies are lying on trolleys. We wake up this morning, many years later, grannies are still lying on trolleys because the HSE is not an ambidextrous organization. In careers, some people think, I'm going to be a CEO, but they don't grind out today's results as a salesperson, as an engineer, as a HR professional. And it's that ambidextrous thing. The future success comes from grinding out today and making the small little steps forward as you're going. So grinding it out will come right through everything I'm saying here. You're building your career. I see people start, young, bright engineers. I see young, bright accountants. I see young, bright quantity surveyors start. And I see young, bright executives from multinational companies when I was working with IMI. And invariably, if one gets in difficulty or one rises fast, you have to have an intervention, and you're trying to see what's going on. And my advice would be, don't move forward too fast. Sometimes the company is willing to promote you before you're ready. If you're not ready, you just say you're not ready. I really want to get this right first. Get the foundations right. Note I'm going back to the building metaphors here, but you get your foundation right. And if you look at anybody's career and if you dissect it going back, you'll say, why is that person a CEO? That person at a certain stage, that other person's right next to them with an equal IQ and sort of an equal work rate. How come that one made it to the top? And in many cases, from my research of this, it's because the one that gets to the top was slightly slower. So don't always be in the front of the queue. Don't always be rushing your jumps, since we're on a race course here. Work and learn, and you will be noticed. rather than trying to be selling yourself. Your career works as follows. We talk about building a career. The first stage of your career is leading yourself. You're an engineer, you're an accountant, you're a HR professional. Your job is to do your work. Notice the word I'm using there is not manage yourself, it's lead yourself. And what lead yourself means is that you're actually, in whatever you're doing, that you're innovating. I sat in a lot of public sector and I chaired a lot of public sector interviews. And one of the questions I'd like to ask I'd ask in that context was, in the process or system you run, can you tell me your 3 biggest change achievements in the last 3 years? Some people answered they hadn't changed the process. Do you think I'd recommend them for promotion? So again, it's this constant thing of leading yourself, which is looking as, how can I do this differently? How can I do it better? It's a questioning that actually runs through that all the time. So the first stage of your career is leading yourself. When you get really good at that, somebody's going to pick you out to lead a team. But the problem is that leading a team is entirely different than leading yourself. And the trick in that career building piece has been identified by a guy called Rob Sharan in a book called The Leadership Pipeline. It's probably the top book on career building you'll ever get. It's been a bestseller twice, 10 years apart, which is, what's that tell you? People don't listen to it enough. But he says, if you make the change, if they make you a team lead, you have to change what you value. So if I'm a great sales guy, I do my own work. I go home, I feel satisfied because I've achieved. If I'm a great engineer, I do the same thing. I'm also looking at better ways of doing that. So I get promoted. Now I'm leading a team of engineers. Suddenly my job is not to be a super engineer. It's to lead them, make them better at what they do, to enthuse them to get better, to look at the processes. That's the whole concept of the MBA, and I've been lucky to teach on quite a few of those. I'm just keeping one in while I'm doing this job, which is the Trinity MBA, is the one I still teach on. But again, that's what an MBA is about. And that's the dream of most companies career-wise. So you might start as an engineer, you might start as an accountant, you might start as a HR person, you might start as a marketeer. You might get to lead that function. Your next step then is, can you lead a business? And that's what a general manager is, somebody who can lead a business. And that's where you add an MBA if you want an MBA. You might not need one. So then, can you lead a business? Next stage of your career. And GE was a company I greatly admired. A guy I've met is the great Jack Welch, and very interesting guy in a room not much bigger than this. I was at a presentation with them, but it gets very, very interesting there. Their view is, can you run $1 million business first? If you can, we might give you a $3 million business to run. If you can, we might give you a $10 million business to run. And they bring people through, building their skills, and what you're doing is building a general manager at that point, who could be a CEO of a bigger organization, which is what we call lead an enterprise. And that's the career development. That's the leadership pipeline. So when we look from HR, if you want to build your career, you may start at something. You're unlikely to finish as the same thing in your career, but you may decide that. And that's what we call plateauing. I might decide I don't want to lead a team. I want to be an absolute expert in tax law, but I don't want to lead a tax team. And some companies have been very good, particularly German companies, in actually saying, in order to get promoted, you don't have to leave what you're doing if you're a technical expert. But again, you may decide at any point here, this is what I want to do. This is where my work-life balance comes in. Because what you generally find is, as you hit leading a business, work-life balance tremendously suffers. The view of a lot of the multinationals would actually be, we're now paying you a lot of money, a high-stress job. We're not going to time you in and out of here, but we expect you to be where you need to be and do what needs to be done, and that you're not counting the hours either. And there's a price of admission, is what we call it in executive development. So, if you say, I'd like to be CEO, but maybe I don't want to work those hours, you may actually be in a position of actually saying, I'm not willing to pay the price of admission for that role, or I don't want to work that hard, or I don't want to deal with that amount of stress, I don't want to deal with that number of rows and fights as it's going. So that's the normal career platform from the way the companies actually look at it. What makes a successful career, if I looked at any executive or coached any executive, would be the first thing is your aptitudes. What the hell are you good at? Like any company strategy, pick what you're good at, build on it. We all have God-given gifts. They're the ones to build on for your career. Your skills come with the training and professional development you get with that, and your interactions with others. And that includes interpersonal skills, which is getting more and more important. If you go back to the pipeline, the higher you go, it's more that it's about your interpersonal skills. The next one is your commitment. And again, in strategic HR, we say you have the right not to want to work. You haven't the right to stay employed, though. You as a human being have the dignity to decide you don't want to work hard. That's great. But you won't be staying with us long. You know, that sort of a piece, that's your right to decide. That's the way strategic HR thinks across organisations. But you need to know, what is your commitment? How hard are you willing to drive for your career? Because that will decide where your career goes. Next one is your emotional intelligence. And I'm sure you've read books on it, you've looked at it. I'm going to simplify it for you. I'm around long enough to have been there at the start of this. This had to be the ultimate dream for Harvard. And their look at the issue on psychometrics is most of the ones you look at is around personality. That will tell you, can you change your personality? What's the research? Can you change your personality? No. You can change behaviours that can change some outcomes, but there's rows in psychology. Is your personality formed in the womb by the time you're 2, by the time you're 3, by the time you're 4, by the time you're 8? But everybody agrees it's formed by the time you're 16. So most of us in here are shagged. We have the personalities we're not likely to be stuck with. No. What's critical? So why does anybody ever look at your personality? Any of you ever do those psychometric tests? Looking at your personality? They're trying to get at is what your personality is naturally focused on. Does that fit that type of job? On the basis that if it is, you're already wired for that. They can't say you can't do it, nor can they say you can do it by your personality, but they can say that fit looks easy if they're actually motivated to actually do it. So that's what IQ was. And that's why I think Goldman and Harvard and all that were really pleased when they discovered this new concept of EQ, because the difference with EQ is changeable. So you can change and build your EQ. In fact, I'd like to bring it down a key and say EQ is what we used to call wisdom. And if you want to summarize, you hear that word a lot, have you got the EQ for a role? And particularly, there's a very strong correlation in executive research between your success as a CEO and your emotional intelligence. So the higher you get in an organization. There's also research that says a salesperson, and it's actually very clear, the higher your emotional intelligence, the better salesperson you'll make. And the other one, the strangest one, but the one that got the initial research in place, was as an American Air Force pilot. You're more successful if you have a higher EQ. Now, I can understand that in a big aircraft where you have a crew, but the original research they did was with fighter pilots. What's the issue with fighter pilots and EQ? Why will I think it's unusual to pick a fighter pilot? Because they don't deal with other people. You're on your own, but yet if you have higher EQ, you'll make a better fighter pilot. So let's just go through what this EQ thing is, because what I'm saying, you can develop your IQ. You can improve your IQ by around 11% in tests if you practice. You won't do any more than that unless it's a really weak test, which is not really valid. So you can't do anything about your intelligence. You can't do anything about your personality. You can change your behaviors, and you can develop your EQ. So I need to describe to you what this EQ is at a basic level for your career. And this is the thing that holds most people back, is this lack of EQ. So the first thing is, do you know how you're feeling as you're sitting there? I wish that Muppet would shut up, he's boring me. If you can do that, you know how you're feeling. If you don't know how you're feeling, that's a little bit worrying, okay? Do you know how you're emotionally feeling? Start point. Second piece is, can you control that? So people losing their temper, what's that telling you? They're most likely to have low EQ. So one is, do I know how I'm feeling? Secondly, can I control how I'm feeling? And think of it, in dealing in any senior leadership role, that's a basic. Now it brings us to the next one, which has a gender advantage for females. It's not fair, but that's what the research says, so I'll go with the research. I won't fight the numbers. And the research says that women are better at empathy. I once did for another engineering company, for a building company full of civil engineers. I handled their executive development, and they're a top team of civil engineers, and they all scored very well. These were really good guys. They scored really well. There was only 2 women in a group of 28 males, and the 28 male civil engineers, they all scored low on empathy. So it was an unnatural act. But the great news with EQ is you can develop empathy. So there's tricks you can put, not tricks, there's steps you can put in place to learn empathy. Again, the way people learn, grow, and become wise over time. But you can actually add empathy. So empathy is, do I understand how you're feeling? That are just about to die. That feeling, can I understand how people feel? The next piece then is one that sets people apart. It's called emotional management. In other words, can I change the mood in this room? No evidence of that to date. But that's emotional management, which means as a CEO, can I go into a room and make the group depressed? Or can I go in and enthuse them? There are 2 things I need to be able to do as an actual CEO. I need to be able to, our results are terrible, we have to think deeply about this. I want to leave the group depressed. A big word to use, but I need to decide how a team will feel when I leave the room. Likewise, if we're doing a performance review, how should you feel at the end of it? The way I intend you to feel. That's emotional management. The next one is optimism, and again, as regards yourself, what you're trying to do is you're trying to connect yourself with where is my motivation? Am I self-motivated? If not, I need to find out where that is, or I need to decide I don't want to go there, and that's a human right. And so that's what emotional intelligence is, that self-awareness of your own feelings, your ability to manage those feelings, your ability to read the feelings of others, your ability to manage the feelings of others, your optimism and your own self-motivation. And they'll give you put those together and you've got your EQ. Strong correlation between that and a successful career. In fact, it's stronger than IQ ranks, which is a really interesting one. A lot of the time when we're talking about things like intelligence nowadays, it comes down to really, there's multiple intelligence, but a lot of organizations will look very quickly at your numeric analysis or analysis skills and your verbal analysis skills. And nearly every CEO position that will be tested in detail. And again, what you're trying to see is, has this person got the smarts to actually see these things through effectively. So there are a few little hints, I hope, on building your career, and I hope I've introduced Kirby to you. If you have any interest in Kirby, come to careers@kirby.com, kirbygroup.com, and you'll see we have over 40 different positions up on the website at the moment. And by the end of the year, I will have added another 150 people to our workforce for roles in Galway and the west of Ireland, for roles in Dublin, and for roles in Holland, Sweden and Finland. Thank you very much.